There's an enormous problem that is affecting Warhammer 40,000, and I promise you that it is an issue for some of the best players in the world. And today we're going to make sure that you don't suffer from this issue like, honestly, 90+% of all players do. And it's really a very simple mindset change, but there's a lot of thought put into it. So buckle in, because this is critical for your improvement as a Warhammer player, 40K player. Guys, losing your models is a fear that people have in Warhammer 40,000, and it is a 100% natural fear that is going to affect most people in all aspects of their life. This is a fear response that is ingrained in humankind, and it does not only affect us in Warhammer 40K. It affects us in our daily lives. It affects us in our jobs. It affects us in our family lives. Oh, it's so hard for me to talk to my wife about whatever because I'm afraid it's going to cause friction. Oh, it's so hard for me to ask for that promotion at work because what if they say no? Blah, blah, blah. There is always going to be fear in every single aspect of your life. And as silly as it might seem, it is a truly destructive force in Warhammer 40,000. So that's what we're going to talk about today, even though this applies to much more important things than just 40K. You will lose games when you have the fear of losing your models. So we need to fix this. And I'm going to talk to you about differences between sacrifice, and I'm going to talk to you differences between wasting your models, right? So how does applying fear? You actually should be expecting and you should be planning for losing your models in Warhammer 40,000. The Warhammer 40,000 is a strategic war game. Your models will die. And this applies to basically every single strategic game you can ever think of. In chess, are you willing to sacrifice a pawn to pick up someone's bishop? Of course you are. Do you expect to ever play a single game of chess without losing a single pawn? No, you'd be a psychopath if you did. Much like in 40,000, no matter what happens, and this is a mindset that I want everyone to understand, you will lose units. I personally, the way I approach the fear and the concept of losing units is I go, okay, I should lose units. I expect to use units. I'm actually happy to lose units so long as when they are destroyed, it is serving the purpose I had planned for them to serve. Boom. And this leads us into the conversation between the differences of sacrifice versus waste and another concept called spending units for victory points, which we're going to detail right now. So number one, let's talk about spending units for victory points. This is a very, very big deal that I see a lot of people kind of just tend to ignore. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. There is a lot of nuance behind this. I'm going to kind of try to expand your mind here a little bit so that you can grasp it. The game is won off of who has the most victory points. And when we do a little bit of rough math, and trust me, I'm not a mathematician, but this is going to be close enough. We have 2,000 points in our armies, and we have to score 90 victory points because you're going to score 10 victory points just for having a painted army, assuming that it's, legally painted, not like just one color. So basically what you're doing is you're just using 2,000 points of your army to score 90 victory points. That's the maximum amount of points you can score. Now, yes, you can also deny your opponent's points by victory points by using your 2,000 points of your army. Basically, when we run the math on it, roughly, and there's going to be some decimal points. Someone let me know in the comments exactly how many decimal points it is. But basically, every single 100 points of your army needs to either be scoring or denying your opponent 4.2 victory points. That is a very rough way of looking at the game, and it is a very reasonable way of looking at the game. So, for example, if you look at this little picture that I have here in this slide, let me just actually maybe make it a little bit bigger. You see that there's some prosecutors in the center of the battlefield, and there's a nasty ball predator here. So my opponent is, say I'm the custode player in this situation. I'm running the witch seekers, the prosecutors, or whatever, and I just advance them to be in the center. Well, if I drew area denial, I'm running them in the center to go score me area denial. I know full well that my opponent is about to murder them, and those things are now no longer going to be in the game. However, I just spent 40 points, maybe 50 points of my army in order to score me 5 victory points. And by our metric of 100 points of our army scoring us 4.2, that's actually a really, really good value for me. So I'm not wasting these models. I'm actually spending them very intelligently to go score me victory points. And on some level, every single person who plays the game actually understands this concept. But we need to elaborate and make it even more profound. So I am totally okay spending my 40 points of my army to score me 5 victory points. Now, when I say that 100 points of your army should be scoring or denying 4.2 victory points, while that may be true, there are times where I am going to be taking 400 points of my army. Say it's my Dante who's leading Sanguinary Guard. That unit might never actively score me any victory points at all, and they might still serve a great purpose because what they did is they controlled my opponent's board movement, or they eliminated a unit that my opponent had, which was going to be denying me scoring victory points. On the other hand, some games when I'm playing like Orcs, for example, I'll have a 40-point unit of Gretchen that will be responsible for scoring me 20 plus victory points because they stand on my home field all day, all game long, and they just rack up the points. That's a very valuable unit. So it's not necessarily that 100 points of your army has to score you 4.2 victory points or deny your opponent 4.2 victory points, but it is a useful frame of reference for you guys to understand what is the relative value of units. Of course, there's nuance behind it, and it can get a little more intense than that. But what I really want to talk about today is the concept of sacrifice versus waste. This is a huge difference that a lot of people just do not understand. And if you understand this, you are going to be so much better and so much further ahead of this game. This is actually a concept that we were talking about in my Discord, and some players who are really good at the game, and I absolutely respect, just can't grasp this. And that's gonna hold them back from getting to the next level of being able to play. So just because a unit dies doesn't mean it's wasted. Just because a unit is destroyed in turn 1 does not mean they are wasted. If I had just sent that freaking Witchseeker unit to go score me 5 victory points, was that a waste? No, that was a sacrifice. I sacrificed my unit for 5 victory points. All right, so sacrifice. Your unit / your resource that is being diminished, it's served its purpose, or it's gaining you value in its demise. Waste. Your unit / your resource that is diminished serves no purpose, or you're simply deprived of a resource without gaining anything out of it. So this leads us to a larger conversation, and I'm going to show you exactly how to lose your units intentionally. So this is actually a couple great examples for you guys, okay? And I'm going to use TTS to kind of help me flesh this out a little bit. Infiltrators, deploying within line of sight, hoping to go first and jail your opponent. So this is a huge conversation, and it was actually fairly controversial that we had in the Discord. Do I put my infiltrators out in the open? And if I do put my infiltrators out in the open, am I just hoping to go first? Are they accomplishing no other goals than just, dying if I go second and jailing if I go first? Is that a gamble? If I go second, is it a waste because they automatically die? Well, potentially it's a waste, but if they are serving another purpose by being out in the open, then suddenly it's not a waste. So if I had a unit of commandos, for example, and actually, maybe I'll just switch to TTS, and this will help me kind of elaborate this a little bit better so that everyone can understand this fully, because this is a very critical concept. If you don't grasp this, it's really going to hurt your play. So let's make sure that we do this one correctly. All right, here we go. So basically, this is Orcs versus Blood Angels, and you could do this with any army in the game that has infiltrators. This is just a good example so that you guys can understand the concept of sacrifice versus waste. So when I deploy my commandos in a big line like this, and before I hear anyone say, yes, they are in coherency, look, this guy is 0.4 inches away from this guy, and he's 2.2 inches away from this guy. So they are in coherency even when they're strung out like this. 2-0, 2-0. So every single freaking video, someone comments, they're not in coherency. Bro, they're in coherency. All right, so when I deploy this unit of commandos all the way out here, I know for a fact that if I go second, they're dead. If I go first, I'm probably just going to advance them forward and move block the crap out of my opponent. Now, does that mean that they're useful if I go first and that they're just a waste of models when I go second? Absolutely not. They're still incredibly valuable to me in the fact that they're dying turn 1. So the fact that they're deployed like this, 1, it stops my opponent from dropping his infiltrators to do the move block to me, because I have this massive area that he cannot drop his infiltrators in. So he can drop infiltrators in approximately right here, but them getting all the way to the truck to move block this guy turn 1 is very unlikely at that point. 2, it is stopping his vehicles from getting into position to shoot my trucks. So if you see these lines that I have drawn here, these red lines, this is dictating the line of sight that is possible. So if a gladiator or lancer, say, comes on up here, he can't end his move within an inch of my commando. So even if he comes right here and he gets to sit on this red line, that is the furthest the distance that he can actually, here, maybe I can minimize this to show you guys better. This is where his line of sight is. He can see everywhere within these 2 red lines. So he can't see this truck. So this truck is perfectly safe. It can't be shot by the lancer. The lancer can't see this truck. He clearly can't see this truck. He clearly can't see this truck. Now, if he could move a little bit further, say if he could move to here, because, Blood Angels have Assault Doctrine, have the ability to advance and shoot, or if this was any Gladius army, they could advance and shoot, or, any other army in the game that could just advance and shoot, then he would be able to see and destroy my truck turn 1. But because my commando is here, it means I'm able to deploy the rest of my army very aggressively without risk. Same thing down here. What if my opponent wanted to bring a vehicle that can come this way? Well, we know that our opponents cannot land on top of this 2-inch terrain here, so he can't put a battle tank here, for example. So I don't have to worry about him drawing line of sight from here because that's an illegal move. So maybe infantry could stand here and shoot, and that's something I would have to account for in my game plan. But if he's only really threatening me with battle tanks as far as shooting is concerned, this is as far as he can possibly move because he cannot end a move within an inch of my commandos. So he's going to have to stop and deliver roughly right here, which means that this truck is safe and that this truck is safe because these are the extremes of the angles that are not blocked by the ruins. So what I've done is if I go first, here, let me just back these guys up a little bit. If I go first, basically what happens here is all of my commandos are going to either just advance forward or they're going to even charge the tank line because they can't, be overwatched. And they're going to make it so that my opponent gets no movement phase. If I go second, it doesn't matter that my opponent gets to go first because he can't get any relevant lines of sight, even though I have deployed the rest of my army hyper aggressively. So now my opponent is kind of like, oh darn, do I move up aggressively and potentially expose myself to turn 1 charges from my orcs? Or do I stay back because I can't really gain anything from coming forward? Now, of course, I am giving up a few sacrifices in order to do this. So first off, I'm sacrificing a 120-point unit. Now, for me, 100% worth it because that means I'm not getting jailed and it means I'm putting crazy pressure on my opponent. It could mean that my opponent can score overwhelming force turn 1, and they could even potentially score a storm hostile objective. Now, if they're going to score a storm hostile objective, that's actually kind of tricky because how are they going to get here? Now, if they have like a JPI squad or whatever, they could just charge with JPI. But then, orcs can be -1 to wound, so you guys can see that there's things that I can make that tricky. Overwhelming force, okay, my opponent's going to score 3 points off it, and that's not necessarily super cozy to me, but the ability to deploy hyper aggressively is very cozy to me. And the ability to deny my opponent any of the desirable staging points and desirable shooting lanes is very, very critical. And remember, he can't see through here either, so there's just no way to see any of my super hyper aggressively staged things. And that is so darn powerful, guys. So this is an example where if I go second, yes, my unit will 100% die turn 1, but it is not a waste. It is a sacrifice that actually gives me a huge advantage in the game, especially when you consider everything it gives me, including stopping my opponent's movement and stopping them from doing the same jail move to me. So guys, you really got to think and consider in your games, when you're losing models, it is okay as long as you're losing models in such a way that serves your purposes. That's what I do in my game. It's something that I highly recommend you start working on in your game. If you do this, you're going to have a lot more success in Warhammer. This is a challenging skill to develop, so you're not going to develop this right away. Don't worry if it takes you a little bit of time. But this is challenging, but you can do it. And once your units start serving purposes, whether they're alive or dead, oh boy, is Warhammer 40,000 going to open up to you. And I also highly recommend you try to apply this concept to your own life outside of Warhammer 40,000 as well. For example, if you're a CEO and you're running a business and you've built this with your own hands and you're like, okay, I am currently generating $12,000 a month and I've done it with all my own hard work, my own sweat. But you're at a point where it's really hard to grow your business because you're too busy. It might be time to sacrifice some of your salary to hire a new employee who can help you grow the business even further. But if we're too afraid to sacrifice that maybe $4,000 of our salary to get a new employee on, then we're kind of stuck and it's going to make it hard for us to get even better. So we have to understand this concept that sacrifice is different from waste, and sacrifice can help us improve in all aspects of life, especially Warhammer 40,000. Guys, this was Happy Corrupting Wargaming. I hope you enjoyed this content. This is a very critical concept for everyone to grasp. With that, I'm going to take off and I hope you have an amazing day. Crump on. Bye-bye.